Hey Rising Church, I hope you're having a great week and that you had an amazing weekend this past weekend at 318. I hope just the whole event was just awesome for you, and just the opportunity to get together as a church family and pack 400,000 meals, to go through the whole weekend hearing messages from John Wheeler and all about refugees and hopefully being moved to do something about it and to have compassion for those who have gone through such a difficult transition. I hope that you just had fun and laughed and played and cracked up, and I just hope it was an awesome weekend. The reason we do these kinds of weekends like 318 and Rising Weekend is we want them to be catalysts for moving you in God's direction and growing you in your faith. And so I hope and pray that was accomplished. We're coming to our final stretch here in Groves, and that means that we're taking up our Grove Babysitters Fund. And I just want to encourage you to give generously towards that. Like I mentioned last week, we have these high school students who have served faithfully behind the scenes for the last 2 months, 2.5, 3 months, serving the younger families in our church by watching their kids to make it possible for them to go to a Grove. And so I just want to encourage you now to give, whether you have kids or not, to give towards this fund to help support these students as they go on their mission trips, but also support these parents. It's investing in the next generation, which is one of our core values. So just give generously towards that, and I just want to thank you ahead of time for your generosity. As we transition into this week's reading in Psalms, I really enjoyed Psalm 37 and Psalm 73. To me, they just both spoke to my heart. This idea of, fretting and worrying and kind of looking at the world and seeing what the world has to offer and thinking that's what we want and what we need. It kind of reminds me of the song that I just used to love back in high school by this group called the 77s, which I'm sure you've never heard of. It was a California band. And actually, funny enough, on date night, this question came up. If you remember, what was one of your favorite gifts your spouse ever gave you? And for me, that was easy. It was Kimberly. I don't know how she found them, but she found the first 2 albums that the 77s put out, which I thought were only available on vinyl, which is what I had. And she somehow found the CDs. I guess they had remastered and put them on CD, and she tracked them down. And so I just remember early on in our marriage, she gave that to me. It was just an awesome gift that she gave me, because it took me back to some of my favorite songs. And one of the songs that it reminded me of is a song called, it sounds a little odd and funny, but it's called The Lust, the Flesh, and the Pride of Life. And the whole song is this idea about how the lust of the eyes and the lust of the flesh and the pride of life, it just drains the life right out of you. And it's actually a quote from 1 John 2:16, where it says this: "For everything in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life comes not from the Father, but from the world." And I just think that's an important thing for us to remember. We struggle with that, and I think you saw that in the Psalms this week, where, a couple times in 37 and 73, he's saying, man, I just fret, I started to doubt, I started to worry. And in Psalm 73, it's just really interesting. He says, my feet, in verse 2, had almost slipped. I had almost lost my foothold. Why? Verse 3, for I envied the arrogant when I saw the prosperity of the wicked. And he's saying, I wanted what they had. It looked like they had everything put together. And he said, that's kind of what I lusted after. I desired what they have. And if you keep going in Psalm 73, he just keeps going and going about, they have pride, they're arrogant, they're violent, they're callous, they don't believe in God, but it seems like they're doing better than I am. And I start to become jealous, and I start to desire those things and want it. And then he has this transition. I don't know if you noticed it or not, but right in the middle of Psalm 73, he transitions. And he says this in verse 17, till I entered the sanctuary of God, then I understood their final destiny. He says, I needed to have that perspective change. Because when my heart and my flesh and my eyes were lusting after the things of this world, which do not come from the Father, it's like I was duped in my head. And I thought that they had things better than they did. But all that stuff, he's saying, it ends up being empty. It's like grass that withers. It's all just here today and gone tomorrow. But I love in 37 where he says, hey, don't do that, but instead trust in the Lord with all your heart, and delight in God, and he will give you the desires of your heart. And just the idea that when you stumble, when you start to desire what the world has to offer, it's like God's there. And you just have to get that proper perspective. You got to remember who's in charge. You remember God. You got to remember what he has done for us. And I just love till I entered the sanctuary of God. It's the idea that that's what I need. I just need that perspective. I got to get my eyes fixed on God, and then I'll have my priorities straight. And I just love how it continues in 73, where he says, "You hold me by my right hand," and then he says, "And nothing. This earth has nothing that I desire but you." And I just think that's important for us to remember, because we get tempted, we get jealous of the wicked, and we think that it seems like they're having all the fun, or that, they just seem like they have this carefree life, and maybe we feel burdened. And it's like we just have to have that right focus. And even in chapter 37, it's like they got to remember their day is coming. Their fool says there is no God, and it's like they have an end. And although things may look good in the momentary, it's not going to be good in the end. But I just like the idea that God, even when we start to have these doubts, even when we have the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, even though when we have pride, that God, for the righteous, for those who are seeking after Him, He's not going to let us stumble, even when we get discouraged, even when we get our eyes, off of Him. And so I really hope that over this last couple of months that reading the Psalms has helped you put your eyes on Him, helped you to kind of come into His sanctuary, to see who God is, so that you can have that right perspective. And so I just want to encourage you as you guys start to have your discussion this week, just to keep going in Psalms and to keep really, drawing near to God. Because He's the one, even though you stumble, even though, we trip up with the lust of the flesh and the lust of the eyes and the pride of life, that His right hand is going to be what holds us up. He's going to be the one to sustain us. He's going to want to keep us going. But that's only going to happen if we enter the sanctuary and we get that right perspective. So I hope you guys have a great discussion this week. I hope you get some insight. I hope you really enjoyed this week's readings, and that you'll have the chance to share with one another. So have a great discussion, and we will see you next week.